Hello. Today we're talking about Unit 7, Section 4, right? We start there. And our first topic is on the contrary, right? A very problematic expression for Spanish speakers because we tend to think this means por el contrario, and this is not so. So if there's one thing I wanted to remember about on the contrary is that you can easily try to picture it as the equivalent of no, just no, right? It used to introduce a statement that says the opposite of the last one. It must have been terrible, says somebody. On the contrary, that is to say, no, no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute, right? Quite the contrary is just more emphatic, right? So I don't find him funny at all. Quite the contrary, right? No, I don't find him funny, right? To the contrary is a different thing. You may wish to check it out later because I don't want us to get confused, right? So be careful with on the contrary, right? And its opposite, which is on the other hand, right? I don't remember where I could go directly to the entry on the other hand. It seems here. It was at the bottom. Missed it. So as you can see here, well, my mouse is not working. It's used to introduce a different point of view, a different idea, or something that is an opposite, usually, right? So on the one hand, they would love to have kids, but on the other, they don't want to give up their freedom. So thinking from another perspective, right? We're going to see more examples as we move along in section 4, right? For example, this activity practice 1 is really, really, really important, right? By the way, I will be sending you a file with more examples for on the contrary, right? So that you have more examples, because actually your brains might be set on a translation that is por el contrario, que es en realidad más parecido a on the other hand, right? On the other hand introduces something that is opposite or different, right? Usually something that is opposite. So the first example on page 122, it's impossible to tell whether a man is married or not. On the other hand, women usually have Miss or Mrs. before their name, right? So this is a rather opposite idea, right? And sentence number 2, your parents didn't want you to go abroad, did they? On the contrary, so no, they did want me to go abroad, right? And they were all for it. That's the explanation. So be careful with this one, right? We'll continue. Actually, then you will do all the activities and you'll let me know if you have any queries, right? But the other one that tends to cause trouble is in the end, right? At the end seems to be, excuse me, a more referential expression, so at the end of something, but in the end means after everything is considered, right, or after a long period of time, right? So he tried various jobs and in the end became an accountant. In the end, they decided to spend Christmas at home. So after something, right, it is the end, but it's not the final thing, the final scene, but because you would say at the end of the movie, they get married. Right, and when you speak of a film, you may use in the end, but it may refer to the actual last part of the film, right? In the end, they get together, right? But it's not the end of the film. And then you can try your best to impress the interviewers, but in the end, it's often a question of luck, right? So after everything is considered, so be careful. There are very good examples here, so they hopefully they will be of help, right? I think you also have let alone, right? And that's a great expression, right, in English, let alone. Unfortunately, I think it appears only once in activity 2 on the same page, right? And this is Sentence 3, right? I would never want to hurt another human being, let alone my best friend. That is to say, well, this is used to restrict the idea, right? And you emphasize so that this is not true. There isn't enough room for us, let alone any guests, right? So without even considering something as important as or as large as, I didn't have any clothes, let alone a passport, right? So imagine you wanted to go abroad in this case, right? All right. So as regards the activities for this section, for section 4, I would like to note simply that they're very useful, so I will get your answers in class, but I wanted the expression at the end. This is a very deceptive idiomatic expression, right? Because you may take it literally, but that is not the case, right? Somehow it appears right at the bottom, right? And this introduces the most important fact of something, right? So at the end of the day, he'll still have to make his own decision. So if you take everything into account, right, that's the idea, right? At the end of the day, this is activity 5 here in the book, sentence 7, at the end of the day, and in the final analysis, which is actually a bit roundabout to say the same thing, how many trophies we win isn't what is important. So there isn't any day in this sentence, right? So when everything is considered, right? And then there's another expression that we find here that I think is very, very useful, and that is in retrospect. Speaking of time, right, when you think back, this is activity 6, sentence activity 6, sentence 6. That decision was a bad one, and I think that in retrospect, so thinking back, we all recognize that in retrospect, right? I think I was wrong if I think back. And there's another expression that is very similar, which is with the word hindsight, right? In hindsight, or with hindsight, or with the benefit of hindsight, right? So with hindsight, it is easy to say they should not have released him. A friend of mine usually uses this expression in Spanish, that is, con el diario del lunes, right? It's a bit different, actually. But actually, thinking about what we know today, we can tell something about the past, but only because we know something today, right? So that's why we tend to say the last expression here, it is easy to criticize with the benefit of hindsight, that is when you can look back, but with today's news, right? Okay, let's move on to section 5, which brings in many, many collocations, right? And you need to choose the right ones. They're very, very useful choices here, like make a basic, a clear cut, a crude, or a dubious, or an important decision, right? I like this word crude, which is partial false friend, because we do use crude, crudo para petróleo, right, in Spanish, but it can also mean vulgar. So you speak of crude jokes or crude language, right? And also to mean something that is not accurate, right? In crude terms, right? Or in very simple terms. And dubious is a very nice word because it can mean doubtful. So I was dubious about the idea, I didn't know what to do. But a dubious business or a dubious character, that means suspicious, right? So very good. That I think is very useful. Well, but by the way, we don't speak of, you don't make a dubious distinction, right? You make a basic, a clear cut, or an important distinction, right? Not crude or dubious. Okay. With the next point, comparison, we use the verbs stand, bear, and that's it. It bears no comparison. It stands comparison. But as a verb, it something compares favorably or unfavorably with something else. And this is a very nice choice for us to paraphrase, right? When something compares favorably with something, what do we mean, right? Let's see if the dictionary gives us something. Let's push it one bit while you think about it. Yeah, the figures compare favorably with last year's. So they're good because it's likely to be successful, right? It's an advantage, it's something positive. It's a very nice choice, right? And collocation, by the way. All right, I'll leave you to make your own choices here, right? And then we can focus on some idioms, right? Idiomatic phrases in point number 5, which is as easy as falling off a log, which is very direct, right? And like a bull in a china shop, so being too forceful, right? And number 7 actually gives you lots and lots of idioms that are very, very good to talk about people who are very different. They are like chalk and cheese, right? And then in C, you knock spots off someone or somebody knocks spots off you. That means they're much, much better, right? Then being in a league of your own, you can also be in a class of your own, right? So it's simply to be better, right? And what I like about this idiom, well, sorry, an example here is used, for example, with seated tennis players, meaning that they are some of the best, right? And they have been, they are in a certain position in a competition. Now, the highest seeded tennis players are in a league or a class of their own. That is to say, maybe the 5 best, right? Nobody can compete with them, right? Or sometimes they do, right? Sometimes you get someone who can actually beat them, but this is usually very, very hard, right? To be streets ahead of someone is usually in business, right? But also a student can be streets ahead of another one. And the same for head and shoulders above the rest, meaning much better. So these idiomatic expressions are very much synonymous, right? Okay, for the activities, we will comment them in class, and then we have the exam, right? And in exam practice 7, I wanted to comment on this word lack, because it is very interesting as a verb. You say something lacks something else, right? You lack the skill to compete, but something is lacking in, right? So when you use lacking, to be lacking in something, right? So something is lacking, I don't know, in chemicals or in taste, right? We can use it for different situations. In activity 2, they use this word laid back, right? Which is a very popular, very, very useful word. A laid back atmosphere is here, meaning easygoing, right? So relaxed, right? Do you think you know the opposite of laid back? So we have highly strung in British English. Maybe you knew this word differently as high strung, which is American English, right? So meaning nervous or easily upset, right? So highly strung child or, well, a horse, but also used for people, right? Telling them they're high strung. Okay, and that is all. I hope this is useful. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you all. Bye.